Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of In Pit Lane, coming to you from the lockdown here in beautiful parts unknown behind the suburban curtain. And of course, In Pit Lane 24 years ago started basically as a means of promoting areas of motorsport that just weren't getting any mainstream media coverage, and that continues to be the case today. And over the 24 years we've been on air in Melbourne, a feature every year has of course been the Victorian State Circuit Racing Championship. We've covered races from Sandown, Winton, even back to the days of Calder Park. For many years we've been heavily involved in the coverage and promotion of that particular series. Of course, now that we're in South Australia, there is of course a South Australian State Circuit Racing Championship, and we're going to find out a little bit more about that and the general state of motorsport in South Australia a little bit later on with our special guest, the president of the South Australian Sporting Car Club, Keith Williamson. But as I said, lots of things happening. News is starting to sort of tick over at a pretty healthy rate right now. So let's find out what has been happening around the world of local, national and international motorsport. Let's check out the In Pit Lane Motorsport News. And now the end is near. Triple Eight Racing have announced that their deal with General Motors Holden will terminate earlier than planned at the end of this current supercar season. In a statement released on Monday, the team said the future branding of Triple Eight Supercars team is yet to be determined, with the current contract between co-title partner Red Bull and Triple Eight in place until at least the end of the 2021 season. Although Holden has now officially withdrawn from the team, it doesn't mean that the Commodore has totally vanished from the scene. Well, not yet anyway, with most of the current Holden teams expected to continue racing the red brand cars until the new Gen 3 regulations are announced. Motorsport Australia has unveiled a new partnership with the Ferrari Driver Academy. The Ferrari Driver Academy Australia will soon be a part of the new Motorsport Australia Centre of Excellence based at Sydney Motorsport Park, with plans underway for its construction to begin in the coming months. The Australian-based zone of the FDA will be the Academy's Asia-Pacific Oceania selection zone, encompassing a significant number of major countries, including China. Motorsport Australia President Andrew Papadopoulos said the agreement with the iconic Ferrari team would give drivers in the region, particularly those in Australia, an exciting opportunity to join the Ferrari Driver Academy development pathway. Drivers between 14 and 17 will be eligible to take part, with the two best drivers of the year from our region invited to Ferrari's Fiorano racetrack in Italy, where they'll be racing against drivers from other academies around the world. The winning driver of that competition will then be offered a drive with the FDA in a European Formula 4 championship. Williams has announced that it may be willing to sell the team after disastrous yearly financial results and the immediate end of its title sponsorship with Rocket. In a financial statement for 2019, Williams Grand Prix Holdings announced that the group revenue had dropped by more than $20 million in the last year. Team owner Sir Frank Williams and Deputy Team Principal, his daughter Claire, have long been opposed to any sale, but in the current difficult climate, all options are now back on the table. Williams also announced it had terminated its title sponsorship deal with Rocket with immediate effect. The Rocket Group had become the title sponsor in 2019 on a 3-year deal. No reason has been given for the termination from either side. However, Rocket co-founder Jonathan Kendrick said in a statement that other sponsorship commitments to motorsport, including the W Series and the Venturi Formula E team, would continue. And Formula 1 and the FIA have released an updated calendar of events for this year's truncated Formula 1 season. The season will kick off with the Austrian Grand Prix on July the 5th, the first of 8 European races over 10 weeks. There'll be back-to-back Grand Prix in Austria and Silverstone. The other events on the calendar are Hungary, Spain, Belgium and Italy. 8 races are the minimum needed for a World Championship to be recognised by the FIA, although Liberty Media says that further races will be announced in the coming weeks. Currently, all races will take place without spectators, while Formula 1 plans to create a biosphere on location, with everyone entering the paddock being tested for the coronavirus and observing strict social distancing. NASCAR's return to the track continues with the latest round at Bristol Motor Speedway, and it was Brad Keselowski who held his head as all around were losing theirs who took the checkered flag. Keselowski recovered from a crash on lap 465 to take the win after race leader Chase Elliott and Joey Logano hit the wall. Bristol fully lived up to its tough reputation with several big crashes, including this big one on lap 230 involving drivers including Kurt Busch, Tyler Reddick, Matt DiBenedetto, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Jimmy Johnson and Alex Bowman. And IndyCar returns to the track this weekend on the high-speed banking of Texas Motor Speedway. The track's widely regarded as one of the toughest in any regular season, but just how drivers will cope with the huge G-forces of the track after such a long break is the great mystery. The race will mark the race debut of the new Aero screen, and in a huge boost for the series, will be seen live and in prime time on the NBC network right across the USA. The race also marks the return of IndyCar racing to our TV screens with live coverage via Murdoch Vision this weekend. And that's the In Pit Lane Motorsport News for the week commencing Monday, the 1st of June 2020. We'll have more news next week. You're watching In Pit Lane on Channel 31 Melbourne, Channel 44 Adelaide, and of course on the In Pit Lane YouTube channel. Also remember, please support community television. The shutdown is still as we go to air today or record this program. The shutdown on June the 30th is unfortunately still happening. Contact the Communications Minister's office, that's Paul Fletcher MP, and let him know that you would like to see community television and local TV continue in Melbourne and Adelaide. Otherwise, everything we get is going to come straight out of Sydney, and let's face it, nothing good comes out of Sydney apart from the Hume Highway. Hello to our few people who watch us in Sydney. So we're going to take a break now on In Pit Lane, but when we come back, we're going to go across the border in the other direction, head over west, and we're going to talk to the president of the South Australian Sporting Car Club. He is Keith Williamson. He'll be joining us right after this break. This is In Pit Lane. We'll be right back. Well, our guest this week on In Pit Lane is Keith Williamson. He's the president of the South Australian Sporting Car Club. As you know, over the years on In Pit Lane, we've covered extensively the Victorian State Circuit Racing Championship. I mean, that was the whole motivation for starting the program some 24 years ago. But now, of course, we're on Channel 44 in Adelaide. I thought it would be a good opportunity to catch up with what's happening across the border in South Australia. And Keith, well, obviously everything's been shut down for the past couple of months, but when do you think that motorsport in South Australia will be kicking off again?
Motorsport in South Australia is scheduled to start round about the end of June, specifically July. Sporting Car Club own a hill climb facility, Colin Grove Hill Climb, and we're actually planning on having our first hill climb on the 19th of July. And that'll be our first hill climb for 2020. And the Sporting Car Club operates all of the club race meetings in South Australia, both at Mallala Motorsport Park and at the Bend Motorsport Park. And we're scheduled to run what was going to be our round 3, but will be the first race meeting for this year on the 1st and 2nd of August at Mallala.
Now, of course, you mentioned that you were running all of the rounds. Now, the situation in Victoria is a little different to a lot of states in that each individual state round is run by an individual club. Is there an advantage, do you think, of the fact that you've got one coordinated body in the South Australian Sporting Car Club running all of those meetings for the state rounds?
It's a historical evolved that way. We run a 5-round championship, and that is the state championship series. If you go back 20 years ago, the Austin 7 Club would run a race meeting annually. And if you go back to the days when Adelaide International Raceway was in operation, then the Formula V Association used to run 2 race meetings. But over time, the viability of running race meetings is not always as good as it could be. And it's just evolved that the Sporting Car Club now runs the state championship. This, of course, was assisted by the fact that Clem Smith, as the owner-operator of Mallala Motorsport Park, was heavily involved with the Sporting Car Club. So we had a partnership arrangement there. Now that Peregrine owned both Mallala Motorsport Park and the Bend, we now hire those facilities rather than run them in partnership.
You mentioned the name Clem Smith there. I mean, Clem's something of a legend in South Australian motorsport, a well-known sports sedan competitor back in the day, but as you say, also the owner of Malala. What did, he passed away a few years ago now, but what does his legacy mean to the people of South Australian motorsport? I mean, what was his contribution?
Clem Smith, as a competitor, started competing, I understand it, back in the very early 50s, and worked his way through. In 1971, Keith Williams developed Adelaide International Raceway, and that caused the closure of Malala as it was then. Clem, in turn, purchased Malala and reopened it in 1981. By that stage, so we from 1981 through about 1985, sorry, it'd be about 1989, I guess, we would have had 2 race circuits running in parallel. Adelaide International Raceway became under the ownership of Bob Jane, and subsequently closed down from running any race meetings. So from a South Australian point of view, if it wasn't for Clem Smith, we wouldn't have a race circuit, and so he's very highly revered in that matter. And of course, being a staunch competitor himself, he had the understanding of what competitors required, and just gradually developed Malala Motorsport Park.
You mentioned, of course, you had 2 racetracks. Now you've got 2 racetracks again with the opening of the Bend. What does a venue like the Bend, an FIA Level 2 standard circuit, a major international circuit, what does that mean to South Australian motorsport? And of course, it's all nice to say that you have this wonderful facility, but the point is, at your level, at the state level, is it affordable? Is it something that can be used regularly by the average motorsport competitor in South Australia?
I think the viability of running race meetings at a circuit like the Bend is difficult. It's, as you say, it's a FIA Level 2 circuit, and I would suggest warrants the costings of an FIA Level 2 circuit. And that means that competitors' entry fees have to, by definition, be quite expensive. So the entry fee for a race meeting at Malala is approximately half that of the entry fee for a race meeting at the Bend. However, the experience of running at the Bend is probably warrants that difference in costing. So consequently, our 5 race series that we run, 3 of those race meetings are run at Malala. 2 are 1-day race meetings and 1 is a 2-day race meeting. At the Bend, we run 2 race meetings, which are both 2-day race meetings. The plan for this year, considering that we have 4 months of operation, is that we will run a 2-day race meeting at Malala and a 2-day race meeting at the Bend and a 1-day race meeting at the end of November at Malala Motorsport Park. The Bend run both international and national race series, and they obviously take precedence over us.
Well, we'll find out more about what's happening over there when we return after this break. And we'll also find out how all of you watching on Channel 44 in Adelaide can be a part of the South Australian Sporting Car Club. But we'll be back with Keith Williamson in just a moment. This is In Pit Lane. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to In Pit Lane. Our guest this week is the president of the South Australian Sporting Car Club. He is Keith Williamson. And Keith, overall, what's the health of motorsport like in South Australia? I mean, it's played a very unique part in local and international motorsport. When you look at the history of, we started our season this year with a look at the history of Elfin with David Dowsey with his new book, and you look at companies like K&A Engineering and Barana and all of those sort of companies. There's been a very healthy scene in South Australia for as long as I can remember, and of course the site of our first Formula One World Championship Grand Prix on the streets of Adelaide. So what's the current health of motorsport from a competitor's point of view, and also from the point of view of marshals and other volunteers?
Well, the first thing I'd like to refer back to is that you mentioned people like Elfin and K&A. That situation here in South Australia is still very healthy. We have Super Shock as a South Australian-based company that is expanding considerably. And of course, we have the building of the Brabham BT62 here in South Australia. So from that point of view, and K&A is still a strong operating company. So accordingly, that aspect of motorsport in South Australia is very healthy. And that generates its way through to even club level competitors. We have, there's obviously the varying aspects of categories. Circuit Excel as an entry level category has just grown considerably. We are out of our 100 to 120 entries per race meeting. Approximately 40 of those will be Circuit Excels, and that obviously it is the strongest category there is. But things like improved production and Formula V still retain their importance. We had conducted at the Bend last year the HQ Nationals, and that was a 59 entry field for that. So I would actually say South Australian motorsport at club level is healthy. The issue this year, of course, is that we just haven't had the opportunity to enjoy our motor vehicles. And as it was said to me yesterday, we should have some incredibly well prepared motor cars when we actually return. So from a competitor point of view, it's quite healthy. The Marshals' point of view is, I think, a perennial international problem. The source of volunteers seems to be reducing, and it gets considerably more difficult to get the same numbers as perhaps we got in years gone by. But technology is also developing. We now have at both circuits here in South Australia, Malala and the Bend, light panels at each flag post. So that assists in the actual marshalling area there. And of course, with the advent of Motorsport Australia Return to Racing guide with their COVID-19 plan, that is also going to change things in terms of volunteering. And the areas such as documentation will now be done electronically. Drivers' briefings will be held, drivers' briefing notes will be published in advance, and drivers' briefing will be held in the open. Scrutineering will also be different. So the whole idea, the whole volume and number of volunteers, it is my understanding, and I stand to be corrected, but they are talking of only 2 marshals per flag post. Now, in the past, we've had up to 4 at a flag post. And so this is going to make a difference to all of the number of volunteers that we require. We've yet to have a race meeting where it has put the race meeting in jeopardy due to lack of volunteers. So there are sufficient out there, you just have to find them.
So if people are interested in becoming a part of the South Australian Sporting Car Club and getting involved, I mean, what sort of roles are there for people? I mean, I've said on the program many times, I mean, just because you're not actually, you don't own a racing car, or you don't have the money to sort of get behind the wheel, there are other ways of being involved in the sport. So what sort of roles are available, and how can people contact you to find out more about the club?
Well, the Sporting Car Club's quite easy to contact. We're on Facebook and the social media, and we obviously have a website, www.sportingcarclub.com.au. We have offices that are manned 5 days a week here in South Australia, and so it is easy, as if you like Google, and you can contact us via the website, you can contact us via the phone, or you can actually personally visit the premises. The Sporting Car Club has approximately 1,700 members, and it is a club that caters for all forms of motoring. So it has a number of sections. We have a vintage and veteran sections. We have a classic and modern sections. We have historic racing register. We have a competition section. We have a library section. So when you actually consider that we have these numbers of sections, the people within those 1,700 members, I would say it was the minority that are actually involved in motorsport. But through our motorsport operation, where we actually employ a motorsport coordinator, there is the ability to be a marshal either through the South Australian Motor Racing Officials Association or through the Scrutineering Association or direct with the Sporting Car Club, so we can place them accordingly. And when you mention things like the Grand Prix, but more specifically the Adelaide 500, Clipsal 500, Superloop 500, we coordinate the marshals through the Sporting Car Club for that event. So if you actually have a look at specifically Clipsal Superloop, the clerk, of course, is a Sporting Car Club member, as is his deputy, as is his assistant. You know, the starter is, the course car manager is, and so on and so forth. So we're actually very, very strongly involved, not only in our own club level motor racing, but in supporting the international and national events that are held here in South Australia.
Well, it's obviously, sounds like it's going very, very well over there at the moment. Hopefully, depending on what happens with Channel 44, as you may be aware, it's we're fighting for our lives in both Melbourne and Adelaide at the moment to stay on the air with the current government situation. If hopefully we get another stay of execution and we can come back, we can get over there and actually wave a camera around in front of you guys for one of your rounds coming up in the second half of the year. But right now, Keith, thanks for joining us and letting us know about what's happening over there. Certainly keep us in touch. But for now, Keith Williamson, thanks for joining us in Pit Lane.
Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you once again to Keith Williamson. And remember, if you would like to join any car club and you would like some details, make sure you can contact your local branch of Motorsport Australia, and they'll give you all the details. No matter what state in Australia you're watching us from, there's always a demand for all sorts of people behind the scenes in motorsport. It's a great opportunity to meet a lot of like-minded people, to travel, as you saw the start of the year on our first program with Christian Schmidt. You can, becoming a marshal, becoming whether it's a flaggy or a pit marshal or a scrutineer, can take you all over the world. So get in touch with the clubs and become a part of this sport. It's one of those sports that you can actually, you don't just have to sit in the grandstand. Well, right now you're not allowed to sit in the grandstand, but you can still be a part of it by becoming a marshal or getting involved in the running of events like the South Australian and Victorian State Racing Series. So next week on the program we'll be joining you once again with more news and more guests from the world of local and international motorsport. Remember, if you'd like to contact us, you can do that by sending us an email to theshow@inpitlane.com. You can also follow us on the In Pit Lane YouTube channel, where we put the programs up every week, plus bonus content. We've also got Facebook and Twitter accounts, so you can follow us and keep up to date with our news from there. So once again, thanks for joining us. I have to tell you right now, it is very, very early in the morning. I am now going to finish what I'm saying now. I'm going to edit this as quickly as possible, and then I'm going to bed. So thanks for joining us. Until we see you next week, sweet dreams. Bye for now.